Like to start off with you just kind of doing a brief introduction. Let us know who you are.
I'm Josh Kurutz. I am a chemist at the University of Chicago. I manage the nuclear magnetic resonance facility there. So it's like MRI for molecules. People put test tubes of chemicals in these for analysis. And so I'm a shared resource there. And yeah, so this whole operation needed a chemist, and so I'm it.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Lawson. I'm the founding artistic director of Lawson Dance Theatre, and I am the choreographer. And as Josh says, I am a chemist because I'm the choreographer of the element.
Tiffany, how did you come upon the whole idea for Elemental in the first place?
I was looking for a project that would be a little bit more outside of my box and my comfort zone, and something that's very important to me and that's very important to our company's mission is making a connection to the community and doing work that our audiences can find value and something that resonates with them. I've always had a deep love for science and something that always has very much interested me. And I started thinking of how I can incorporate science with my choreography. And I started just doing a lot of deep thinking and meditating and a lot of research on other projects that other choreographers had done. And there's been a lot done with physics, which is something I'm fascinated with. If you hear me teach dance class, I usually talk about things that are very much related to physics. But I kind of went a little further and for some reason started thinking about the periodic table of elements and thought about how I could make that something tangible for the artistic community, but also too for the chemistry community. And I thought for surely I would need a partner in the chemistry land because it'd been quite some time since I'd studied the periodic table. And so I reached out looking for a chemist who would be interested in working with a choreographer. And I so amazingly found Josh.
And then Josh, after meeting Tiffany, what were your initial thoughts on the project, and have you ever collaborated with artists before?
I haven't really collaborated before. I've had my own artistic projects before, and so I'm used to talking with artists about science, and kind of the science and art connection. So, but I've never really collaborated, and so I thought that this was going to be really exciting because it's something that where we really needed a partnership. It's not like you've got one person who can do all of this, and so we really needed this to be a collaborative effort, and so I got all excited about that. I started thinking about it, and it's been really great working with Tiffany and bouncing ideas off of her and figuring out, saying, well, you know, I've got this understanding of these elements and this kind of chemistry. What can we do in terms of dance? And so I would think about how these compounds and elements and chemicals behave and what their properties are, and then try and think about that, saying, well, what parts of that would mean something to a dancer? And then Tiffany would take that and run with it, because she could say, okay, I know what to do. I know actually how to flesh that out, and and so we worked back and forth with that. And that was very fun.
So you already just kind of touched on this, but you started meeting, it's been about a year now since you first started meeting about the project. So what were those first meetings like?
For me, my first meeting with Josh took up about a half a notebook and just writing down all different sorts of notes from the information Josh was giving me. And we talked about so many different chemicals. I know we talked about radioactive chemicals, and we talked about radioactive elements and and organic elements and inorganic elements. And we were kind of all over the spectrum of the table. I learned pretty soon after that there were elements still being created when I got to hear Mark speak from the IUPCA, and was blown away by that. Josh also showed me this little card at our first meeting, and I realized that the periodic table looked quite different from when I had first learned. And it's because there's always being new elements created. And so the periodic table as I knew it is much larger, which to me is fascinating. That these chemists are constantly researching and constantly coming up with new elements. And to me, that was so fascinating because you can use scientific and formulas and mathematical equations to create these elements, but how do you just come up with those formulas and these equations? Well, it takes something outside of that part of your brain to be creative enough to create something new. So I found definitely a deep connection during our first meeting about how both of those worlds go together, how you can have all of this science and math, but then you can still have this totally artistic side. And then when it goes together, you get things like our ballet that we're creating, but that's the way you get new elements. So that was kind of my initial takeaway. After our meeting, I was definitely reading all my notes, like, what in the world did I write down? But I actually understood most of it and was quite surprised that I had remembered so much from being much younger in my days. So I've definitely developed a deeper love for science and especially chemistry. And it's definitely motivated me to want to learn even more. And I'm even trying to figure out how to make a chemistry dance degree for myself. So that's how fascinated I am.
I really enjoyed the resonance we had over creativity and just the act of creation. I mean, it was, and I think that this is something that'll be important to bring out in the performance, is that I think that people don't necessarily appreciate as a factor in scientific life, in the pursuit of science, is that's really a very creative process. And this is one reason I think that artists and scientists get along so well, because you have to have some vision of the future, or some vision of something going on, and you have to have a very creative brain in order to understand that. And as chemists, I think that we're on the one hand, if you look at a chemist, they've got a white lab coat and they've got safety goggles on, gloves, and they're holding up a beaker of blue. But what's actually going on in the chemist's mind is images of molecules. So they see that thing and they're thinking about molecules, or thinking about reactions. And so in order to make that connection, there has to be very kind of a creative process going on. It's just kind of a different mental discipline. And so I really enjoyed getting to meet Tiffany, and and getting to know her creative process and how and her history, and figuring out what she's about, and how and why she wanted to flesh this out as a project. And so that was that was great. I was kind of thinking, you know, so I was trying to figure out what it was she was trying to do here, and how much, and also just kind of how much chemistry she knew, and she actually, you know, knew her stuff. And so that was really good to see it, and I just knew that this project was going to work out really well.
The ballet is broken up into 2 acts. Act 1 has more focus on the organic elements, and then Act 2 is the inorganic elements. I'm curious what the difference between those 2 organic and inorganic elements are, from both a scientific standpoint and then an artistic standpoint. So, Josh, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So as a chemist, if you're trying to divide up elements, compounds, you know, and the periodic table, the division, organic, inorganic, is usually is pretty basic. And so if we could separate these things out into 2 acts, that just sort of spoke to me as something that would be that would immediately, basically, it now I see that it's just it's a positive communication tool to let people know. Like if I talk to a chemist, I say, oh, you know, I'm involved in this ballet, and there's 2 acts. There's organic, inorganic, and then they know, okay, this is really chemistry. This is really, you know, there's going to be some real material here. So organic chemicals. Technically, if you talk to a chemist, you'd say they'll say organic chemistry is based on anything that's carbon based. So you have carbon forming a framework for the molecules, and it's all the reactivity of carbon. And inorganic chemistry would be things like iron and silicon and beryllium and all kinds of other elements like that. So it was fairly easy to make that distinction, but to make that a more something that would resonate artistically, I figured let's focus on the elements of life as being organic, and things that are not technically life as we know it, unless you're an exobiologist. So we'd focus on hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and I put in a special plug for phosphorus because that's my favorite element, as being the elements of life. And for the most part, you know, aside from traces elements and maybe some extra involvement of sulfur, like most everything that you see going on in life is involving those elements. And so it's different combinations of those elements that give you life. And then the inorganic, the thing is that we have a whole 118 elements, and so that's only 5 of them. So the rest of the elements have to be treated somehow, and so that would be the inorganic elements. And for that, we have other kinds of questions to answer.
But we were trying to make a structure of the ballet and what that would look like, and I wanted to keep somewhat of the classical ballet structure, but also being aware of the way that dance is going nowadays, especially with ballet, especially when you see some of the old ballets redone, and wanted to make sure that the structure that I set up was gonna be something tangible, not only for the audience to understand, but for me as a choreographer, how I would be able to differentiate the 2 acts movement-wise, and then also too within the scenes, the breakdown. So for me, I got very excited because I do have a very eclectic background in my training. My training is mostly classical ballet, But I have a whole other side of training from being in the theater world, from doing movement for actors, doing pieces that were only movement based, not necessarily dance, movement based, doing things like musical theater, doing Broadway jazz. I love Bob Fosse. So for me, when I heard organic versus inorganic, I thought, well, this is a perfect way for me to execute the different styles of myself as a choreographer. Where in organic, a lot of the movement would seem very much that way, very natural, in movements that you would kind of normally relate to when you're seeing classical work. And then in inorganic, being able to use that kind of theatrical, I shouldn't say organic doesn't have any theatrical qualities, sure does, but inorganic, being able to use that different side of my choreography that can tend to be, a lot of my friends will say is very eclectic. And it comes from my theater background, doing things that are more movement based, doing things that are influenced by jazz. So I was very, very excited once we were able to get the structure together and, like Josh said, try to narrow down 118 elements into 2 acts.
I remember how this worked out now. It's I think that I came in saying, okay, I know chemistry. I kind of figure I can communicate maybe something in sort of dance terms, but then I have no idea how to put on a production. And so talking with Tiffany, she started talking about the structure of ballets, and it was like, and that was really eye-opening and even mildly mind-blowing for me, because I had no idea that these, I'm a novice when it comes to how these things are structured internally. So the idea of having that traditional ballet will have these different acts, and they have this whole structure, kind of like a Shakespearean play arc, was new to me. And so I got very excited about that. And so I said, well, how do you do acts in chemistry? And so the organic and inorganic division sort of came, just sort of grew.
Yes, you learned all about the corps de ballet and the pas de deux and all of that day.
Yeah, don't test me on it.
Thank you all so much for watching our sneak peeks today. We really appreciate your continued support, and we will be seeing you in the theater soon for the premiere of Elemental. Until then, stay tuned for updates and more videos. And if you're able, we would love you to consider making a donation to Lawson Dance Theatre. There are links to PayPal and our GoFundMe campaign on the website, www.tiffanylawsondance.com. Stay safe, stay strong, and stay compassionate. Cheers.